All right, peoples. This is a surprise. I didn't know. So I'm going to try and connect the computer.
You never presented before.
I know. That's a shame. Right. Okay. How do I... hold on. You guys can, talk still while I'm figuring this out. Is everyone enjoying the lunch? Castle food is always tastier than non-castle food. That is absolutely true. There's something about the location makes it extra delish. Okay, so I'm going to try and plug in here. I'm talking about getting paid in DAOs. Oh no, it's just a HDMI. Do we have an adapter for USB-C? He's got me. Everything tastes better in a castle, especially HDMI. Tastes better. Okay, so I'm talking about getting paid in DAOs, and kind of one of the reasons this is important is where I believe DAOs are going. And I have to do all this identifying my keyboard stuff. No. Okay. So it's sort of open it up, where are DAOs going? I think, we've all talked about DAOs for many of years. We think about them, they seem pretty cool. Maybe they seem like that sort of social layer stuff that isn't as interesting as the smart contract layer, because of course technology is always a little bit somehow firmer and more tangible. But what we look forward in the next 16 to 24 months, what you start to see is DAOs are actually becoming very mature. I think during the 2021 cycle, I think, the vibes DAOs sort of dominated the narrative around what decentralized autonomous organizations were. And that probably burnt out a lot of folks about their importance or their meaning and what they could bring. But if you start to look at it now and you sort of project into the future, what we see is that DAOs are actually starting to capture the entire Ethereum ecosystem. And capture is kind of a funny term to use here because, of course, it's captured by the community, which is kind of the goal in the first place. So in some degrees, you could say we are looking at a successful outcome. But if you don't fully believe that, it just takes a little bit of thinking on what the future starts to look like, right? We know things like Lido, which has 30% of the supply locked up in it, is a DAO. We know that the new staking services that compete with that are going to be decentralized and be DAOs. The roll-ups, which are also going to pool a vast amount of ETH in their bridge smart contracts, are DAOs and being decentralized. The sequencers, they're working on decentralizing sequencers, so these are going to be DAOs. We already have data availability layers, which are DAOs. So you actually start to look forward and see that all the core infrastructure of Web3 is actually becoming decentralized. So it's actually going to be owned by these decentralized autonomous organizations. But there are a lot of questions around this. I'm from Tally. We build DAO tooling. We're a private company. We're looking to build a business on top of supporting DAOs. But when we look out across the ecosystem, you also have to think, well, how do these organizations function? And of course, there are people inside of them who do voting, and they say, yes, we vote for this, let's pass this, or yes, we decide to do this, let's pass that. But at scale, these folks need to get paid. Right? Because at scale, these are actually the people who are making the decisions to run these organizations, and many of these organizations are also VC-backed. We are at this point in the future where a lot of Ethereum's infrastructure going forward is actually VC-backed infrastructure, right? So we're looking at all the stack being decentralized, all of it having some sort of relationship to investment, VC backing that powers it, and all of it that's going to require really active participants to do successful, healthy organization and operations of this, and you're going to need a lot of great tooling, right? So this conversation really is about getting DAOs paid, specifically around service providers like ourselves, Tally, who also look to try and build a business in the ecosystem, but also the people who make stuff work, right? The delegates who are getting stuff done. So I don't know if you've fully bought in yet in the sort of like future of what this sort of like DAOification starts to look like. But I'll give you a few numbers from Tally. And the DAO-controlled protocol revenue today already is in the hundreds of millions of dollars per year. And the TVL of these DAO protocols is over 30 billion, right? And the leading protocols in the ecosystem are already DAOs, right? So if you start to think about what the next bull run looks like and what the futures looks like, you can start to imagine, okay, let's just 10x that number, which is probably pretty conservative, right? So now we're looking at 300 billion, many billions of dollars in revenue. And that's a very conservative estimate. So you start to see how large these ecosystems are going to be. And when you look at the L2s in particular, their entire stack is going to be controlled by DAOs, right? The L2 itself, the data availability layer, the staking, the restaking, the bridges, the ZK coprocessor stuff, the app layer, the DeFi layer, all of it is run by DAOs, or will be run by DAOs very soon, right? And there's delegates. Now, you may or may not be, certainly I'm from Tally, so I'm very close to the problem, but there's delegates. These are people who participate in the DAOs, and they are professionalizing. So you have organizations that are saying, hey, what my contribution to the Ethereum ecosystem is going to be is I'm going to be a professional delegate. So I'm going to offer my services on decision-making inside organizations. And to make a business, they're going to make these decisions across organizations. So if you look at something like Arbitrum, you have professional delegates that exist at the DeFi layer, the app layer, but they're also the same delegates on the L2 layer. They're also participating in the staking layer. They're also going to be participating in the data availability layer. They're also going to be participating in the executive power in the Security Council layer. So you start to see that actually smart contracts aren't going to be the only decider. They're going to be large group of individuals have a lot of social influence on how things are run and organized. And to put the fear of God in you a little bit going forward, you can start to see how folks may move into these organizations specifically with their own business interests in mind, right? You can imagine someone like a Visa or MasterCard acquiring a large stake in staked ETH, or acquiring large stakes in things like data availability. And this is actually probably a good thing, right? Because they are not going to want to build on top of infrastructure without knowing that they have some sort of political involvement in it, right? But to mitigate that a bit, we do need to have non-corporate actors who are participating. Maybe they are kind of companies on their own, but maybe participating as a service of being good participants in these ecosystems. So sometimes people like to talk about governance minimization, and that's a very interesting topic. Of course, it's kind of antithetical to my business, so I think it's terrible. No, I'm just kidding. There's a lot of value to it, but protocols do need to be DAOs, right? Because they need the credible neutrality, the decentralization, and the competitive advantages of being a DAO. We see this today. Arbitrum is the largest L2 by far. I think it's larger in terms of TVL than all the other L2s put together. And their DAO is truly decentralized. The members of this organization have total control over the Arbitrum protocol. They can elect sequencers, they can elect data availability, they can do anything they want. And it's kind of the Wild West there. But it's interesting because you have all these people coming together to try and coordinate, mostly out of self-interest, and then sort of the market aligns what sort of self-interest means in the end of the day, because they want to both be successful, make themselves more successful. There's a lot of fighting, there's a lot of conflict, but there's a lot of resolution. There's a lot of agreement. There's a lot of getting stuff done in this ecosystem. So this is a little bit of shilling on Tally. We're a market-leading tool. DAOs have moved over $250 million on Tally. This is mostly during the bear market, which is a really interesting number because you would think that in the past 10 months, DAOs have been dead. But actually, every quarter, essentially, in the past 10 months, they've been spending more and more money, right? And these are things like liquidity incentives, paying service providers to audit the protocol, doing things like raising money or creating grants programs. These communities are actually really active now. And we expect to see them get more and more active as basically new infrastructure types are created and people feel that the power they have is very relevant. Okay, so I already talked about this a little bit. DAOs power all layers of the stack. Maybe visually this is a nice way to look at it. You can kind of imagine this whole stack being an L2. Okay, I guess I'm not out of battery, or, oh, yeah.
We have a job video, but I don't think we have it.
Okay. well, it comes up, and then you keep watching the movie, and you think you don't have to plug it in just yet. You got like another couple minutes. We'll see how far I get, right? So this is, to my point earlier, imagine this is an L2. At the bottom, you have the staking protocols. I don't think it's me, though. My screen's still on. What? Yeah, but my screen's still on. Oh, you think that? Okay, if somebody can plug me in while I'm talking, that would be great. So if you think about this, this is an L2 itself, right? So you have the base, as I mentioned, the staking protocols, sequencer data availability, then the roll-up bridges interop, the coprocessor stuff, oracles, financial, blah, 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 app layer, right? So the whole roll-up itself is a DAO. All of their participants are in DAOs, and it's DAOs all the way down. So DAOs are getting serious stuff done. That's sort of like background as to, oh no, I'm like the other charger. Damn. So DAOs are getting serious stuff done. But so maybe the core of my talk here is really like who's creating all the proposals, who's working to pass proposals, who's planning the community calls, who's organizing the community, right? Who's getting this stuff done? And it's really delegates, right? For the most part, it's these people who are participating in the protocol. But as we kind of like to joke about at Tally, they're kind of like unpaid internships, right? There's plenty of DAOs out there that you can join, and everyone's like, come, participate, be a member, go work for free, right? Some of these DAOs are extraordinarily valuable, right? These are multi-billion-dollar organizations with some of the largest venture capital organizations behind them, and the people who do the work don't even get paid, right? So you have this really funny dynamic, which could turn nasty, right? Because there's a lot of ways to extract value from an organization, and if you're going to work on it seriously, you're going to do that. But just participating in DAO, like passing things, voting on stuff, that's not paid, right? And things do need to get paid, right? Delegates power the DAO ecosystem, but they're not paid. And people are experimenting with different ways to pay delegates. Things like retroactive public goods funding, grants, these type of things. I've written in the past about how these aren't enough. These aren't sustainable. If you think about, retroactive public goods funding, I like to do a joke that, if only you could give your landlord some retroactive public goods funding, right? If only you could go to the grocery store and pay with retroactive public goods funding, that would be really great. But most people can't. And I like to give a little bit of story on how it's important to think about fairness in these organizations, because remember, again, they're VC-backed, most of them, not all of them. Most of them are VC-backed. Most of them are worth billions of dollars. Most of the individuals who hold a lot of tokens actually don't vote for legal reasons. They're afraid of working and being held legally liable. So the people with sort of the least to gain tend to be doing maybe the most work at times. And an example that I like to give is about how in college, banks would recruit students. Like when I went to school, banks would recruit freshmen to go out and sign up new freshmen to credit cards, right? So they'd say, hey, whoever signs up the most number of new users to credit cards gets some sort of reward. At the time, it was like a cell phone. You got a free cell phone for signing up the most number of kids. So they would get 100 students to go out and sign up students to credit cards, but only the person that sold up the most would actually win a prize. And sometimes I liken that to some of the base models of public good funding or retroactive public goods funding, right? Where you have these models where it's you're getting paid on impact, but actually what the organization is getting is really a multiplier on their investment, right? And it's a little bit exploitative if it's not done correctly, if it's not done thoughtful, right? We want professional delegates managing the future of Ethereum, right? We want people who have time to research and to look into how this operates, to figure out the best decisions to make here. And that requires, unfortunately, people who eat food and live in houses and, have mortgages and drive cars that require petrol, right? And they need to get paid. You know what? I would like, a little bit more of that, right? These people need to get paid, right? So we've started an experiment here. This is just the first of many. And this is called proposal rewards. It's very difficult to calculate impact. I think when you talk to folks who are working on retroactive public good funding, you're talking about grants, you're talking follow-on grants, you're talking about investment, accelerators. It's very hard to measure impact. I don't have the answer on how to measure impact. I wish I did. We'll keep working on it. But it's very difficult to measure impact. Especially because once you set out the rules, I think if any of you participate in organizations that experiment with ways of funding the commons, ways of getting things done, you'll notice that whenever you publish the rules of how to participate, immediately people game them, right? So you're kind of in this weird set where you're trying to find a better way to get people compensated for their hard work, but every time you try harder, they just try harder to scam you on it. Right? So it creates this kind of unhealthy dynamic that has to be like figured out. So how do we deal with this problem? To be honest, I don't really fully know the answer here, right? Some people love to talk about AI, that we're going to use AI to quantify the value of everything. Of course, you can imagine that that's a little bit scary too when you really take it at scale, right? Like, oh, the humans couldn't figure out how to like pay each other fairly. We'll trust the machines to figure it out. It's a little bit, long-term scary. So what we're experimenting with at Tally right now is proposal rewards, which is a kind of social layer idea. But basically, when you create a proposal and pass it, the only thing at the moment that seems really, truly Sybil resistant is getting stuff done. It's difficult to measure impact, especially when you have like maybe a small council of people who decide that. But you do know these DAOs are spending, $250 million just in the past. Well, and that's just on Tally, right? Like, maybe I'll wind it back for a second. On the governor ecosystem, which is a specific type of smart contract DAO framework that we support, DAOs have spent $250 million through Tally. But in total, they spent maybe close to $600 million, right? So there's a lot of money going through this ecosystem, right? You can't really fake that number, right? You can't fake the amount of ETH being moved. You can't fake the amount of USD being moved, right? That's a very difficult number to game. So we think, okay, what if we just take our proposal successfully passed as a starting point of like, what's valuable? Did you at least get consensus from all these people in the organization? And if that's true, maybe what we can do is we can kind of come up with a tip-based system where we say, hey, everyone who passes a proposal gets some reward and they get to split it with whomever they think deserves it. And this is a pretty social level, so it might not actually be attractive to any of you because there's no smart contracts really required here. But the idea is, in public, you have to nominate yourself to get paid, and you have to nominate other individuals in the ecosystem to get paid. And this can be people who read the smart contracts for you, right? Like what we see in a lot of ecosystems is delegates make some sort of new proposal and they say, hey, we want to change the staking rewards to X, and then they send it to someone who's more technical and go, yo, Brodette, would you please check this out? Is this look good, right? And that person's doing something better with their life, and they stop doing whatever that is, and they check it over, and they're like, yeah, it looks good. I'm glad to have added value for free to your billion-dollar organization. Rock out, right? So in that sort of circumstance, you give people the opportunity, try and build a social norm of, okay, that person should get paid, this person should get paid, this person held the community calls, this person's been running the Discord, this person's been the one dealing with like the really obnoxious people in the organization on the social level. And while it's not a perfect solution, this is definitely just an experiment. We've already gotten great feedback about what works about it and what doesn't work about it. It's important to start trying, because something that we don't talk so much, like one of the other reasons why these individuals are so important for organizations is when we build the smart contract layer, we build with the assumption that we are in an adversarial environment, that all the users who use our system are dangerous inherently. We assume they're evil and trying to break our systems. What's really interesting is once you go to the social layer, however, is it's the opposite. We assume everybody in the Discord is a chill dude, a chill dudette, hanging out here for the vibes, being helpful, right? But the truth of the matter is the person who calls the transaction on the executable that like rugs your protocol is also in the Discord, right? So we're not building social structures that are actually resilient to the same sort of attacks that the smart contract layer is. So the smart contract layer may here be like safe from being rugged in some sense or like hacked, but actually on the social level, there's no protection for that, right? So that's a little bit of like a side here, but it's sort of talking about the social level is really important to secure. And if we can create like habits within the social layer of paying people out for their hard work, you also create a habit of being fair in compensation. Because if you help out with this proposal and getting it passed, and I don't cut you in on the proposal rewards, I actually have to do it in front of the whole room, right? Because the DAOs are open, right? I have to, in public, cheat people out of their hard work. And that's not very socially sustainable, because then the next time a proposal comes up, people are like, yeah, but that guy, he's not a good dude. We don't want to participate. So it's a little bit of an encouragement to start experimenting on the social smart contract side, like how do we interact with one another in an organization. And it's also the opportunity to help DAO tools get paid. I mentioned once before, I'm building a business. I would like to get paid at some point. I got a mortgage, we got cars, like stuff like that. How do we get DAO tools paid? You know, in the past year, a lot of DAO tools went away. They didn't make it. A big part is, how do they get paid, right? If everyone in the organization could construct call data by hand and verify the transaction before it was sent, well, that would be absolutely fantastic, but we don't live in that world. We actually need a lot of tooling to help make consensus. Somebody's got to be paying for the Google Docs, and it shouldn't be the core team or the foundation, because the separation between like the decentralization and who launched the token really doesn't feel very far if the core team or the foundation is paying for all these things, right? So we need tooling to make this process better. We need service providers who are going to come and audit the proposal executable code before it goes live. You want somebody to have another look. Maybe like 2 or 3 months ago, Gitcoin had a little bit of a snafu where they created a working proposal where they're going to fund their quarterly budget, and no one checked that the destination for the $400,000 was not the token contract address itself, right? So the proposal goes live, everybody votes on it, and boom, they burn all the money, right? And that's a perfect example of, would you have paid $399,000 to ensure that you didn't burn $400,000? Maybe, but you need tooling for this, right? And tooling also needs to be compensated. So we need to create social norms for paying for the software, for the tools, for the services that make these organizations work. Because when we think about them scaling in the next couple of years to tens of billions, hundreds of billions, maybe controlling trillions of dollars in value, you start to realize that we can't be doing this with like Google Sheets, Discord, Notion Docs, Slack, Telegram, right? Because one day somebody's going to say, hey, it's an emergency. You know, I'm on one of the Aave Guardian Councils, and Stani calls me in the middle of the night and it's just like, yo, we got a problem. Can you hop in the Discord? Not in the Discord, the Telegram. Let's start signing things to fix stuff. That's not going to work at scale, right? So we need better tools for that. So this is just an experiment, proposal rewards. All this words and talking was basically to tell you that simple thing. We want to start helping people pay one another. And it's early. There's a lot of design space to improve. We do think that there's ways to improve retroactive public goods funding. There's ways to improve grants. There's ways to improve just paying people, creating norms in the ecosystem for that. And I'd love to talk to you about it. So hit me up. I'm here all day. And that was my Dream World presentation.